On August 25th, 2026, it started with her name on a screen. One notification, then the same first name appearing somewhere else, beside a date and an age that made you read it again. Dolly Parton, dead at 80. The feeds filled up almost immediately. Choruses started again from the top. Concert videos sat next to photographs taken 50 years apart. The hair changed in volume, rarely in intent. Jolene came out of phones. I Will Always Love You returned in several different voices. And everyone seemed to find the Dolly they knew, even when that knowledge amounted to one song, one movie, one theme park, or a book that had once arrived free in a child's mailbox. The news hit me harder than I expected. Enough that I put my phone down for a few seconds. I'm not going to turn that reaction into some kind of private grief. I never met her. But her absence still felt immediate, and that gap is exactly what interests me. At that point, the confirmed facts still fit into a few lines. Her family said she died peacefully in Nashville. Her team later said she had been surrounded by loved ones at Vanderbilt Ingram Cancer Center, after what her representatives described as a brief battle with cancer. They did not disclose what kind. A private service is planned for close family. Instead of flowers, her family asked for donations to Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. She launched the program in 1995 in her home county in East Tennessee, and it sends free books to children under 5 in the places where it operates. The choice already tells you something. At the exact moment her life was becoming a story told in the past tense, the tribute was being directed toward an organization built to keep working without her. Grief could become something extremely concrete. One more book in a child's hands. What remains is that sense of an almost collective loss. How did a singer so closely identified with American country music come to matter to people who don't listen to the same music, don't vote the same way, and sometimes agree on almost nothing? A few months before her death, a national UMass Lowell YouGov survey of 1,000 American adults found that 70% viewed her favorably, while only 5% viewed her unfavorably. Her favorable rating was above 70% among people who identified as Democrats and among those who identified as Republicans. In a survey where almost every name produced a partisan split, Dolly looked like a statistical anomaly. People often said she was loved by everyone, as if that kind of affection were a natural trait she'd been handed at birth, along with the voice and the cheekbones. She was funny and generous. Case closed. It's a comfortable explanation. It also saves us from looking at the work. Because that relationship with the public was built over time. For nearly 7 decades, Dolly Parton made deliberate choices about how she would be seen, kept control of her work, and turned celebrity into structures designed to survive her. That degree of management coexisted with the sincerity people heard in her, without making either one feel fraudulent. She knew how to create closeness without giving up control, and how to let people underestimate her without correcting them too quickly. That is where this special episode of Ink and Acid begins. Dolly Parton and the power of being underestimated. To understand that strange consensus around her, we have to start with the quietest form of work involved, familiarity.
I write a page, you take a week. I see the end before you even speak. You're still debating, I'm 10 steps ahead. By the time you blink, I've already fled. Laser focus, minds in orbit. I decode the game before they sort it. Slow me down, nah, not a chance. I'm the glitch they never planned.
She's too fast, she's too loud.
It's gotta be AI.
Not normal.
Familiarity, then. In the hours after the announcement of her death, the tributes did not always seem to be describing the same woman. In Nashville, people mourned the songwriter who had pushed at the boundaries of country music. LGBTQ+ outlets remembered a longtime ally whose glamour had become part of a shared visual language. Families thought about Dollywood, or about the books their children had received. And for part of a younger audience, the loss was simply Aunt Dolly. the woman Miley Cyrus called her godmother, in real life as well as on screen. Those stories sat comfortably beside one another, without the usual arguments over cultural ownership. No one seemed especially interested in saying, "You misunderstood who she really was." People had entered Dolly's world through different doors and still recognized the woman everyone else was describing. For country audiences, that first encounter often came through the Porter Wagoner Show, which she joined in 1967, and then through the songs that brought her voice and songwriting into American homes. 10 years later, the pop success of Here You Come Again put her on radio stations that rarely played country. Movies brought in another audience, 9 to 5 in 1980, then Steel Magnolias at the end of the decade. Plenty of people first knew I Will Always Love You through Whitney Houston, then worked backward to the woman who had written it. Others had never bought a Dolly Parton record at all. From 1986 onward, Dollywood gave her name a physical presence in East Tennessee, a family theme park, live shows, and a staged version of the Smoky Mountains she came from. You could meet Dolly Parton on a family vacation, ice cream in hand, without holding any opinion whatsoever about the history of bluegrass. It is a fairly effective form of cultural integration. You come for the roller coasters, and the singer ends up in the family album. Television shifted the age of first contact again. Between 2006 and 2010, she appeared several times on Hannah Montana as Aunt Dolly, godmother to Miley Stewart, just as she was Miley Cyrus's honorary godmother off-screen. To children who knew nothing about Porter Wagoner, she was the rhinestone-covered aunt who could walk into a sitcom without needing an introduction. Later, Dolly and Miley sang together, hosted New Year's Eve together, and recorded each other's songs. Their relationship made the movement between generations feel natural because it existed outside the promotional calendar. Her bond with queer audiences came through a different history. The exaggerated codes of femininity mattered, obviously, and so did drag impersonation. But the attachment also rested on years of public support for LGBTQ+ fans, including moments when she refused to let her Christian faith be used to condemn them. At Dollywood, she made a point of saying that every kind of family was welcome. Listeners who sometimes felt pushed away by the conservative imagery associated with country music could still recognize themselves in an artist who continued to speak its language. The way she collaborated kept that circulation going. On Rockstar in 2023, Paul McCartney and Miley Cyrus could appear on the same album without Dolly sounding as though she had been assembled by a committee assigned to cover every age bracket. She did not flatten her accent or sand down her humor to enter someone else's audience. The collaborations expanded her reach without making her identity any less specific. A career that long explains how the encounters accumulated. It does not explain why all those versions of Dolly remained compatible. For that, she had a set of biographical stories almost as recognizable as the songs themselves. She talked about growing up poor in the Smoky Mountains, her first dreams of performing, and her arrival in Nashville. She returned to meeting Carl Dean near a laundromat, to the woman from her hometown whose appearance helped inspire her own, and to the comments her body had attracted over the years. The wording changed. The landmarks came back often enough to become familiar. Repeating an anecdote does not automatically make it false. It makes it available. After hearing the same stories for years, we stopped feeling as though we were learning them and started feeling as though we remembered them with her. A listener could almost finish the story before Dolly did, the way relatives do in a family conversation. That repertoire also made the media's job easier. After working through hundreds of interviews, biographer Martha Ackman observed that Dolly often courted journalists more than they courted her. She arrived with the stories, the humor, and a remarkable instinct for giving exactly enough information to make the exchange feel generous. The interviewer left with a good segment. Dolly kept control of the narrative. The boundaries become clearer when you look at what all that apparent openness kept out of frame. The public knew the laundromat story about meeting Carl in 1964. Carl Dean himself never became a public figure. He was rarely photographed, avoided almost every industry event, and remained protected throughout their marriage from 1966 until his death in 2025. Dolly was happy to talk about their picnics or their jokes. Their daily life never became a serial. Home followed the same rule. It existed in stories and in a handful of chosen images, without becoming the permanent set of a celebrity supposedly available 24 hours a day. The anecdotes stood in for access. They offered enough detail to sustain attachment and enough repetition to keep curiosity from setting the agenda by itself. There is nothing fraudulent about that kind of selection. Remaining accessible for nearly 60 years in front of audiences who do not all want the same thing from you takes continuous work. Dolly welcomed familiarity. She did not allow familiarity to become a claim on the whole of her life. And that level of consistency had to register before the first anecdote even began. In a room, on a screen, or at the back of a photograph, Dolly Parton was recognizable in a second. Familiarity had a very specific shape because she had consciously decided what Dolly Parton was supposed to look like.
Too fast. Too much. She thinks too big. She moves too quick. Not normal.
So she had decided what Dolly Parton was supposed to look like. That decision took shape long before professional wigs and stage costumes. As a child in Sevier County, she noticed a woman the adults around her referred to with an insult: the town tramp. For decades, the core of the story stayed the same. Peroxide blonde hair piled high, red lips and nails, heels, a tight skirt. In 2023, Dolly added one detail: clear heels with tiny plastic goldfish floating inside them. The adults saw a woman with terrible taste. Dolly saw the most beautiful person she had ever seen. She never gave the woman's name. In 2016, Dolly described her as a real person from Sevier County. Elsewhere, the memory becomes less stable. A 1982 publication quotes her speaking in the plural about women back home who were called prostitutes. Later articles often turned town tramp into a confirmed profession. The sources established something narrower. The community looked down on her, and a little girl was fascinated by the way she looked. Young Dolly understood what that appearance meant socially. She rejected the judgment attached to it. To the adults around her, those clothes signaled improper sexuality. To her, they meant color, freedom, and a life that looked different from the repetitive work done by the women in her family. She would later say that she admired her mother and her aunts without wanting their lives for herself. Her mother had 12 children. That excess suggested another way to be a woman. Country music already knew how to do spectacle. Porter Wagoner could walk onto a television set in a rhinestone-covered suit embroidered with wagons, guns, and wagon wheels, and everyone understood that as stage wear. Put a comparable amount of glitter on a female singer, and suddenly it became evidence in a moral investigation. Women could be desirable, provided their own desire remained under control. Their rural roots were valuable, as long as they reassured the audience about their respectability. Poverty could be turned into authenticity. It was not supposed to suggest a lack of sophistication. Historians of country music have shown how often female performers were asked to move between roles that already existed for them. The mountain girl, the cowgirl, the faithful wife, the abandoned honky-tonk woman. Dolly piled those codes onto the same body until their incompatibility became hard to ignore. She kept the accent and the stories of poverty, then exaggerated almost everything respectability told her to tone down. The advice to tone it down came early. Dolly later recalled that Chet Atkins, the respected guitarist and RCA executive, took her aside and told her she was a pretty girl who did not need all that if she wanted people to take her seriously. She thanked him for the advice and did the opposite. Years later, once she was a star, Atkins joked that she must be glad she had listened to him. Her answer was 2 words: "Yeah, right." Barbara Walters applied much the same logic on camera in 1977. She reminded Dolly that she was beautiful, then asked why she wore the blonde wigs and the extreme clothes. The compliment came with a compliance form attached. Dolly answered that it was a choice and that she did not like looking like everybody else. When Walters pressed her on being treated as a joke, Dolly explained that people tended to think they were the only ones who understood what was funny. That interview is often recut now as a dual Dolly one without breaking a sweat. The heroic version removes the work from the scene. Dolly was calmly answering a journalist who connected her accent, class background, and body to the way educated people might perceive her. She could not afford the embarrassment the questions invited, or the kind of anger that would have confirmed a different set of stereotypes. Her confidence looks effortless because by then she had become extremely skilled at that kind of exchange. Her appearance kept evolving. The teased hair of high school gave way to hairpieces, then wigs after constant bleaching damaged her own hair. Seamstress Lucy Adams was making dresses for her on the Porter Wagoner Show by the late 1960s. Later teams adjusted shape, fabric, and scale for television, film, and touring. Dolly called the process Dollyizing, a trend, making it louder, making it comfortable for her, and making it instantly readable. Comfort matters here. Heels made her feel pretty and powerful. She liked fitted clothes, color, and jewelry. Wigs gave her the hair she wanted without sacrificing more of her own. The look had a professional function, but it was not a device invented in a marketing meeting. In 2009, she was still insisting that the appearance came from a serious place in her. She wanted to look like the Dolly she knew herself to be. Self-deprecation protected some of that pleasure. Dolly herself used the famous line, "It costs a lot of money to look this cheap." She joked about how many wigs she owned, about her breasts, and about the art of spending a great deal on clothes she described as inexpensive looking. Talking to Roger Ebert in 1980, she said, "I know some of the best Dolly Parton jokes. I made them up myself." Getting to the joke first did not make the sexism disappear. It gave her control of the timing. A host who had been saving a remark about her chest for 10 minutes could discover that Dolly already had a better version, better delivery, and the microphone. Humiliation loses some of its force when the target sets the terms of the joke and makes it clear she can stop playing whenever she chooses. That control also had a professional advantage. A silhouette that consistent could survive a photograph, a television screen, or the back of an auditorium without losing its identity. Dolly was memorable before anyone heard her name. Some people saw the wigs, the accent, and the jokes, then decided they had understood the woman sitting in front of them. She acknowledged that being underestimated could help her in business, while also making clear that the same appearance delayed the point at which her work was taken seriously. Part of her influence on drag comes from that immediate readability. Femininity enlarged until the construction is visible, while still being claimed as sincere. Dolly enjoyed seeing performers imitate her, and once joked, "It's a good thing I was born a girl, otherwise I'd be a drag queen." Queer audiences could recognize something familiar in that practice, choosing the codes, amplifying them, and refusing the idea that construction makes the identity expressed through them less real. That reception does not prove Dolly designed the look with that audience in mind. The connection was also created by the performers and audiences who took her image and made something of it. She had managed something unusually difficult, deciding how her body would circulate through popular culture. Her name and her public character could now move across several kinds of media. The rhinestones caught the eye. The contracts determined who got paid when a song stayed on the radio or moved into another singer's voice. That is where Dolly's story meets Porter Wagoner again, and then a proposal from Elvis Presley's camp.
Walking to the party with my phone on 5%. I just wanna dance with you. Hating on me, oh I hate me too. I said I wouldn't drink tonight, but I just need a taste, so I took a little sip of you. Now I'm out here seeing things that I swore weren't true. And it goes 1, 2, 3, 4 people from the east side. I can see the green eyes, oh. And 5, 6, 7, 8 people with their feet tied. I just wanna rewind. Life is a movie. I've been getting groovy, dancing on the ceiling. Let me catch my feeling. Let's make a bet. If you ain't afraid of death, bet it all. One more call, one more nail in the coffin. Let's eat the rich, 'cause you know we're all the best. We're not lost, we'll die young. I'll be seeing you often, and we can start again. One more call, one more nail in the coffin. Let's eat the rich, 'cause you know we're all the best. We're not lost, we'll die young. I'll be seeing you often, and we can start again. My friend's kinda funny, she's a little pessimistic, but you know we need that view. Who else is gonna tell us what to not go through? Told me not to dance with the man in the black coat. He's a little obsessed with you, but you know me, I love a guy who plays hard to get. Life is a movie. I've been getting groovy, dancing on the ceiling. Let me catch my feet.
Porter Wagoner comes back into the story here because long before Elvis Presley or Whitney Houston, he gave Dolly Parton regular access to a national audience. In 1967, her recording career was still fragile. The Porter Wagoner Show already had an established audience, and its host had enough influence to matter at RCA. Dolly was replacing Norma Jean, whom viewers wanted back. Some of the early reactions were openly hostile. Porter had to ask the audience to give her a chance. That chance had concrete consequences. Their duets brought her voice into American homes, and RCA gave her a recording contract of her own. Porter produced some of her work, advised her, and eventually became both her manager and a business partner. He was not simply standing beside her in an embroidered suit, waiting for history to realize it had made a mistake. Without his show, Dolly's rise would probably have been slower. The problem was built into the structure of that success. Porter had hired a singer for his program. Dolly saw the job as a step toward a career under her own name. As her songs found an audience, she wanted to work with other producers, secure independent management, and try records that might travel beyond country radio. She proposed staying on the show while developing those parts of her career. Porter refused. One archival clip of Porter captures his view of the arrangement fairly well. If he was paying someone, that person did what he said. His authority was neither secret nor especially unusual in Nashville at the time. Male stars routinely hired a girl singer whose position depended on the bandleader. Except Dolly was writing an increasing share of the material, and her solo career was beginning to exceed the role designed for her. What had been a springboard was becoming a limit. She always talked about that relationship with an ambivalence that cleaner success stories tend to dislike. Porter could recognize a great song and fight for his partner. He could also try to control her decisions, and he reacted badly when she left. Dolly credited him with playing a decisive part in her success, while also describing arguments that made it difficult for her to work. They eventually reconciled. The gratitude and the power imbalance belong to the same story. In 1973, after several conversations went nowhere, Dolly turned to the tool she trusted most. She wrote. She later said she knew Porter was more likely to listen to a song than to another explanation. "I Will Always Love You" gave her a way to say that she was leaving, that she understood what he had done for her, and that she did not want the separation to become an act of revenge. The famous story that she wrote Jolene on the same night deserves a little restraint. After finding a cassette containing both compositions, Dolly clarified that the two songs were on the same tape, but she could not say for certain that she had written them on the same night. So the miraculous double feature remains possible, not confirmed. The next day, according to her account, she walked into Porter's office with her guitar and played him the song. He cried, recognized how good it was, and agreed to let her go. Dolly also recalled that he asked to produce the record. The credits on Jolene, however, list Bob Ferguson as producer. The request belongs to Dolly's recollection. It is not a studio credit. The song contains no score settling and no details that identify it as the end of a working relationship. The narrator knows that staying would get in the other person's way, takes the memories with her, and wishes him the life he wanted. Dolly had written a resignation letter and carefully removed the words contract, management, and percentage. That missing context left the song available for other kinds of separation. A listener could hear two lovers saying goodbye. The writing came from a woman telling her boss that she was going to continue without him. The country success of the 1974 release attracted Elvis Presley's camp. In Dolly's retellings, she was invited to attend the recording session and was thrilled by the idea of Elvis singing her song. Then, the day before the planned session, Colonel Tom Parker called. He told her that they did not have Elvis record a song unless they received the publishing rights, or at least half of them. Dolly refused. She described "I Will Always Love You" as the most valuable copyright in her publishing company, and consistently said the demand came from Parker, not Elvis. Her accounts vary slightly. Sometimes she describes the demand as the publishing rights, sometimes as at least half. No public contract survives to show the exact terms. What we can say is that Presley's camp made the recording conditional on receiving an economic interest in the publishing. Dolly would not agree, and she said she cried all night. To understand what she was protecting, we need to separate two things that everyday language collapses into the word song. The first is the composition, the melody and lyrics Dolly wrote. Copyright in that composition can generate money when the work is reproduced, publicly performed, or licensed for certain uses, including film. A songwriter can administer those rights herself, or assign some of that work an economic interest to a music publisher. A music publisher is not the record label. Publishing concerns the composition, its exploitation, licensing, administration, and the collection of certain royalties. Parker was not asking for Elvis to be credited as a co-writer. He was asking for a company connected to Presley's operation to participate financially in the future uses of the composition. Exactly how much control or income that would have involved would have depended on the contract. The second object is the recording itself, usually called the master. Dolly Parton's recording and Whitney Houston's recording are separate masters with separate rights holders. Owning or controlling one of those recordings does not give you ownership of the lyrics and melody contained in it. Under U.S. copyright law, once a song has been commercially released, another artist can generally record a new version under the compulsory mechanical licensing system, provided the legal conditions are met and the required royalties are paid. Dolly could not simply ban Elvis from ever recording the song. What she rejected was the business deal his team required before they were willing to do it. When a cover is sold, downloaded, or streamed through an interactive service, use of the underlying composition can generate mechanical royalties. Radio play and other public performances can generate performance royalties for the composition. Put the song in a film, and you need synchronization permission for the composition, plus a separate master use license if you want to use a particular existing recording. The word song fits comfortably on one line. Its revenue streams need quite a few more columns. Then, in 1992, Whitney Houston recorded "I Will Always Love You" for The Bodyguard. Kevin Costner had suggested the song after hearing Linda Ronstadt's version. David Foster produced Houston's recording, and Whitney received credit for the vocal arrangement. Her version opens without accompaniment, leaving the voice and the words completely exposed before the instrumentation gradually enters. Each return of the chorus expands the scale until the final section reaches the kind of vocal peak pop culture has since handed to countless television singing contestants, sometimes with results that depended heavily on optimism. Dolly's recording works at a different scale. Her voice stays close to conversation. The song moves with the restraint of someone trying to find the least cruel way to announce a decision. Whitney turns the separation into something almost physical, driven by breadth, volume, and the sheer size of the final section. One is not the draft of the other. Dolly created the words and melodic line. Whitney created a performance and a recording, whose artistic authority is entirely her own. Houston's version spent 14 weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, a record at the time. Its success generated revenue for the owners of the Arista Master, and, separately, for the songwriter and the holders of the composition rights. Dolly confirmed that the recording made her a great deal of money. The precise figures repeated in later articles are not based on any publicly available royalty statement. Adding decimal places does not make them audited accounts. So when Dolly said no to Elvis Presley's camp, she was weighing immediate prestige against a share of ownership that could continue producing both income and leverage for decades. She had no way of knowing that another singer would transform the song 18 years later. An Elvis recording could have given her an enormous audience in the 1970s, and surrendering part of the publishing would not have meant earning nothing. She walked away because the price was attached to the future. Leaving Porter had allowed her to choose where her career went. Keeping her publishing interest meant she could continue benefiting from the places her songs went without her. The next question was what she would do with that autonomy once she had it. Part of the answer is in the women she put at the center of her songs. Women country music was often very quick to judge and considerably less eager to hear.
Too fast. Too much. She thinks too big. She moves too quick. Not normal.
Keeping her rights answered one question about power. The next is what Dolly Parton chose to do with that freedom on the page. In her early albums, she kept returning to women rural society knew how to punish and then leave out of sight. Some are pregnant and thrown out of their homes. Another is confined by her husband. All of them understand perfectly well the judgment being passed on them. These songs did not arrive in a genre unfamiliar with suffering. Country music had grown up with Appalachian ballads, betrayed lovers, and stories of death. Dolly herself cited Knoxville Girl, an old song in which a man narrates the murder of his partner. She said those ballads, carried through English, Irish, Scottish, and Welsh traditions, had marked her as a child. Women in country had already shifted the point of view. In 1952, Kitty Wells answered men who blamed women for driving them to bars in It Wasn't God Who Made Honky-Tonk Angels. Later, Loretta Lynn would write about marital sex, divorce, and birth control with a directness that made several of her songs unwelcome on radio. Dolly was neither the first woman to speak nor the only one to make programmers uncomfortable. What stands out is the precision with which she placed the listener inside a woman's consciousness. Just Because I'm a Woman, released in 1968, opens almost like a marital interrogation. The man has just learned that the woman in front of him had a life before their relationship. She sees his disappointment, acknowledges her own mistakes, then rejects the separate standard he applies to her. She is not asking for every sexual norm to disappear. She is asking why a woman's mistake should count as worse than the same mistake made by a man. The direct address matters as much as the argument. We are not watching a humiliated woman from a comfortable distance. We occupy the position of the person judging her. The narrator already knows the logic waiting for her. A man can compromise a young woman's reputation, leave, then go looking for a supposedly untouched wife. The man who took part in the transgression regains his respectability. She keeps the social evidence of it. The song does not turn her into a spotless symbol. It lets her challenge the rules from inside the conversation. On the same album, the bridge uses a much darker structure. At first, the bridge in the title is the setting for desire. The memories return in stages: a first kiss, nighttime meetings, then a sexual relationship suggested without detail. The pregnancy appears only at the end. At that point, every romantic image from the beginning changes meaning. The structure closes back in on the bridge. The woman returns there alone, abandoned and pregnant, and moves toward the edge. The recording stops before naming what she does. Suicide is strongly implied. It is never narrated as a completed event. That cutoff denies the audience the relief of a moral, a rescue, or a punishment. Dolly lets the woman's thought continue as far as it can, and then leaves us in the silence. In older murder ballads, the story often belonged to the man who had killed. Here, the woman at the center of the violence keeps the narration until there is nothing left to say. 2 years later, Down from Dover stretches another pregnancy across several seasons. The young narrator waits for the man who promised to return before her body exposes their secret. The snow disappears, spring and summer pass, the leaves turn brown. The natural calendar becomes a social deadline. Her body keeps moving while the promise remains still. When her parents realize she is pregnant, they throw her out. Her father fears public shame. Her mother calls her foolish for still believing the man will return. The song captures a mechanism of poverty without turning the character into a statistic. She has no secure housing, no income mentioned, and no adult willing to share the risk with her. Even the baby's name depends on the father coming back. Romantic abandonment is also the loss of material protection. She gives birth alone, and the baby does not survive. The song never leaves the mother's point of view. In her grief, she imagines that her daughter understood the father's absence and chose not to live without him. Nothing presents that explanation as a medical diagnosis or an objective truth. We hear the meaning an exhausted woman gives to what has just happened to her. Dolly said she had never been pregnant herself, but had watched women go through situations like this. She wanted Down from Dover released as a single. According to her account, RCA refused, and radio stations did not want the subject, less because the baby died than because the pregnancy took place outside marriage. A 1970 Billboard review also judged the theme probably too strong for airplay. Country music could accommodate murder in its old ballads. A young woman who understood the shame being placed on her was apparently more difficult to program. Daddy, Come and Get Me, co-written with her aunt Dorothy Jo Hope and released the same year, traps its narrator from the first measure. Her husband loves another woman. After days of distress and jealousy, he declares her insane and has her committed. She insists that her heart is broken, not her mind, then calls on her father to come and get her. The song gives us no doctor, no diagnosis, and no neutral witness whose job is to certify her version. It forces us to decide whether her own account is enough. Her husband has been able to turn his version of events into physical confinement. She has to send hers to another man who might be able to free her. Her father represents rescue, but also the exact measure of her lack of autonomy. She cannot simply leave on her own. Dolly connected the song to a real story, although her versions do not line up completely. In 2017, she spoke of an aunt whose husband had been unfaithful. In other accounts, she and Dorothy Jo knew a very fragile woman who broke down after her husband had an affair. The family detail remains uncertain. The stable point is the one Dolly repeated. An unfaithful husband had used an institution to remove his wife from the picture. Money is rarely named directly in these songs. You see it instead in the exits that do not exist. No home of her own, no way to leave, no accessible recourse without a father or a husband. Poverty enters before the chorus does. It determines what a woman can still do when love or family fails her. In 1975, the bargain store changes the narrator's position. The woman still carries worn memories, broken plans, and the remains of a relationship that did not last. She arranges them through the metaphor of a second-hand store and invites someone new to come inside. The image can sound cruel, a woman compared to used merchandise, until you listen to who sets the terms. She opens the store. She decides what remains worth. She offers to trade the past for a future. Her experience has made her neither pure nor unsellable. She insists that repair is possible and that she still has love to give. Some programmers heard references to prostitution in the language of price, entry, and merchandise. Stations pulled or refused the song. It still reached #1 on the country chart. The misunderstanding is almost too precise. A song in which a woman takes control of her own value was suspected of selling her body. Asked about feminism in 2017, Dolly firmly rejected the label. She described herself as a businesswoman and said she wrote about women's experiences because she was a woman, while also pointing out that she wrote male characters too. So what do we do with the label once the songs have already placed those experiences at the center? Her refusal deserves to be heard without being used as an eraser. Sexual double standards, pregnancy turned into shame, economic dependence, and a husband's authority over his wife's credibility were already among the conditions feminist movements were fighting. In these early songs, each woman is left almost alone with her disaster. In 1980, 9 to 5 changes the scale. The narrator is no longer begging a father to come and get her, or waiting for a man to return before her body gives her away. She looks at the boss, the paycheck, the credit taken from her, and then recognizes other women around her caught in the same structure. A private experience becomes a collective chorus. Social criticism can now travel inside a song that millions of women will sing on their way to work.
I've begged for silence just to think. They gave me noise that made me sink. 4 walls, 1 mouth, no help, no grace. Just hunger burning in my face. They sold me strength and pretty lies. Told me to smile while I died. But I break truth in every page and turn my pain into my stage. You think I'm fragile, I'm precise. You see a storm, I see a rise. There's no faith in my design. Just grit, just heat, just fight, just mine. I don't pray to gods, I don't trust fate. No magic tricks, no saving grace. It's me, my mind, my fire, my name. I'm harmony, and if I fall, I'll shake the game. No hope in heaven, no luck for me. Only the rage to set me free. I stand alone, I carry the flame. I burn the silence, I own the pain. I've slept on floors that knew my tears. I've watched my dreams collapse for years. Fed myself guilt with broken hands and built No backup plan, no safety net. Just one brain full of past regrets. You think I'm lost, I carved the map. I made my path through every trap. I am the girl no one stayed for. The girl they praised then walked away from. But I stayed with me. And that's why I will never disappear. I don't pray to gods, I don't trust fate. No magic tricks, no saving grace. It's me, my mind, my fire, my name. I'm harmony, and if I fall, I'll shake the game. No hope in heaven, no luck for me. Only the rage that set me free. I stand alone, I carry the flame. I burn the silence, I own the pain.
The collective chorus that closed the previous segment already had a history. Before the movie, before the song, and before 3 women kidnapped their boss in a comedy, 9 to 5 was the name office workers had chosen for organizing themselves. In Boston in the early 1970s, Ellen Cassidy and Karen Nussbaum were working as secretaries at Harvard. Along with other employees, they began by comparing notes on pay and working conditions. A newsletter appeared in December 1972, and the organization 9 to 5 took shape the following year. The dates vary slightly depending on the archive, because movements rarely begin at the convenient moment when somebody thinks to file the paperwork. Their demands went well beyond a vague request for respect. They wanted comparable pay for comparable work, job descriptions that stopped bosses from turning secretaries into domestic assistants, less opaque promotion procedures, and an answer to sexual harassment. They also challenged the idea that office workers were interchangeable, when companies depended on their skills, their institutional memory, and their knowledge of how the place actually functioned day to day. Salary surveys, public meetings, and highly visible actions made contempt embarrassing. The group expanded, became national in 1977, and later helped establish a union affiliated with the Service Employees International Union, or SEIU. Part of its effectiveness came from that shift in scale. Humiliations individual women had assumed they simply had to endure could now be documented as workplace practices and challenged collectively. Jane Fonda knew Karen Nussbaum. After listening to stories from members of 9 to 5, she began developing a film about office workers. The first version was more dramatic. Fonda later felt it was too heavy and too overtly didactic, so the project moved toward comedy. Screenwriter Patricia Resnick did research by posing as a secretary, and working women in Cleveland were consulted as well. The end credits would thank Working Women, the national organization that grew out of the movement. The 3 leads brought together women who occupied very different parts of American culture. Fonda later said she heard 2 Doors Down on the radio and immediately pictured Dolly sitting at a typewriter. Dolly added another detail. According to her, Fonda wanted her presence to bring Southern audiences into a film dealing, among other things, with equal pay. Casting her therefore served a comic and commercial purpose, with a political consequence attached. Dolly's voice changed the territory the film could enter. Dolly had never acted in a feature film. She agreed to do it on the condition that she could try writing the title song. During filming, she watched the scenes and took notes. Between takes, without a guitar nearby, she rubbed her acrylic nails together to keep the rhythm. The clicking reminded her of a typewriter. At night, she worked the fragments out on guitar and recorded them onto cassette. It is almost suspiciously perfect as a television anecdote. A recognizable sound, 15 seconds of demonstration, and Dolly performing the origin story with her own hands. It also carries a nice irony. A song about exploited office workers begins with the very manicure-conventional ideas of female respectability would probably have advised Dolly to shorten. That anecdote does not explain the whole record. In the finished production, the clicking sits inside a tightly built arrangement. Fast drums, restless piano, horns, and backing vocals push the song across country, pop, and the dance floor. Dolly's recollections attribute some of the rhythmic clicking to her nails. Reissue credits also identify Greg Perry playing typewriter. The lyrics begin with exhaustion. The narrator practically has to start herself manually before she has even reached the office. Once she gets there, her time and intelligence feed an organization that barely keeps her afloat. Her ideas are used without proper credit. Advancement exists in the language of the workplace and keeps disappearing in practice. And the wealth generated by all that labor ends up in the pocket of a man who is not doing the work described in the verses. That last point matters because it prevents 9 to 5 from collapsing into a song about one unpleasant boss. The problem is structural. Some people make the decisions, other people produce the value, and the money follows power more reliably than effort. The narrator is not asking to enjoy her job more or requesting a nicer coat of paint for the break room. She knows exactly who benefits from her day. The music refuses the weight that diagnosis could easily carry. The rhythm keeps moving with the insistence of a morning already ruled by the clock. The lines arrive quickly, packed with action, and then the title returns as a shared measure. 9 to 5 names the working hours, the movie, and the activist organization. It also becomes a phrase an audience can join after hearing it once. By the second chorus, everyone already knows where the beat lands and can hit the syllables with her. That construction moved straight across radio formats. The song reached #1 on the American pop, country, and adult contemporary charts. People could dance to a record explaining that their labor was making somebody else richer. And that is where popular circulation becomes less comfortable to analyze. A political demand gains something when it enters cars, kitchens, and parties. People who will never read a union leaflet can still remember the power relationship Dolly describes. The 9 to 5 movement itself acknowledged that the film and song brought national attention to its work. The cheerful arrangement lets the diagnosis travel without asking anyone to present ideological credentials at the door. But once an idea becomes that portable, it becomes available for other uses too. In 2021, Dolly recorded 5 to 9 for a Squarespace commercial that aired during the Super Bowl. The exploited employee had become an aspiring entrepreneur, encouraged to use the evening to build a second business. The boss had not necessarily disappeared. The working day had simply acquired a nighttime extension and a website subscription. The same melody could now carry a critique of wage labor and then celebrate side hustle culture. There is no neat resolution to that contradiction. Popularity gives an idea access to an enormous audience, but it also makes that idea available for uses that can shift its meaning until it nearly reverses itself. By agreeing to 5 to 9, Dolly authorized at least one of those shifts herself. She knew how to make social criticism familiar enough to move from a mainstream comedy into a Super Bowl commercial. The remaining question is what she refused to let travel with it: partisan commitment and the expectation that she publicly choose a political side.
Too fast. Too much. She thinks too big. She moves too quick. Not normal.
9 to 5 attacked a social order without telling anyone how to vote. Dolly Parton held that line for decades. She could sing about exploitation, defend a freedom, or fund a concrete response to a problem, then refuse to say which name she marked on a ballot. In 2016, a favorable comment about Hillary Clinton was turned into an endorsement. Parton quickly issued a clarification. She had endorsed neither Clinton nor Donald Trump. 3 years later, speaking with Jad Abumrad for the podcast Dolly Parton's America, she described the balance in her audience this way.
Half my people are Republicans, half of them are Democrats.
She also argued that an entertainer did not need to go on stage and attack someone, and that she had no interest in hurting people who came to hear her perform.
There was a specific idea of the job behind that position.
Her audience had entrusted her with its attention, not its vote. In a 2021 interview with People, she explained that she was careful with public statements because she knew how much weight people could place on her words, including meanings she had never intended. She believed her convictions could be useful. She did not want to turn them into weapons. That restraint also produced a very practical commercial result. A Republican voter could buy a ticket to Dollywood. A lesbian could sing Jolene in a bar. Neither had to pass an ideological entrance exam first. Recognizing that advantage does not prove it was her only motive. Dolly herself pointed to the Dixie Chicks. After Natalie Maines criticized George W. Bush in 2003, boycotts and rejection by many country stations hit the group hard. Dolly knew that an audience could be built, and that it could also be lost. Avoiding party politics did not stop her from taking positions on rights. In November 2009, Joy Behar asked whether she supported same-sex marriage. Dolly said yes, then delivered the answer in her usual way, folding a controversial position into a marital joke.
Sure, why can't they get married? They should suffer like the rest of us do.
The joke did not cancel the position. In the United States, marriage equality was still a major legislative and legal fight. Her support for LGBTQ+ people continued to use the language of acceptance, often grounded in her Christian faith. Human beings were not entitled to judge one another. In 2023, when she was asked about anti-trans legislation passed in Tennessee, she spoke about transgender, gay, and lesbian people in her own family and circle of employees, and about seeing how deeply such measures hurt them.
I just want everybody to be treated good,
she said. She acknowledged the harm. She did not name the governor, the lawmakers, or the specific machinery of the law. When a problem could be met with a material response, Parton was willing to put money and infrastructure behind it. The Imagination Library, launched in Sevier County in 1995, sends an age-appropriate book every month to enrolled children in participating communities, regardless of family income. After the 2016 wildfires in East Tennessee, her foundation created the My People Fund within 2 weeks. It provided direct cash payments to families whose primary homes had been destroyed or made uninhabitable. Recipients were not required to prove that they would spend the money correctly. An evaluation by the University of Tennessee found that cash assistance was especially useful for relocation expenses that insurance did not cover. In April 2020, Parton donated $1 million to Vanderbilt University Medical Center for COVID-19 research. The line repeated ever since, that Dolly funded the Moderna vaccine, goes too far. Her funds supported early research that Vanderbilt scientists described as important, including work testing immune responses connected to the Phase 1 trial of the mRNA 1273 vaccine. Her private donation mattered. The vaccine was still the product of a much larger scientific effort, backed by public institutions. Giving Dolly credit for the whole thing is flattering, irresistible to headlines, and factually wrong. Even the stories about honors she refused need some journalistic cleanup. The Trump administration offered her the Presidential Medal of Freedom twice. She declined once because Carl Dean was ill, and again because she did not want to travel during the pandemic. Early in the Biden presidency, she said she worried that accepting one then might look partisan. Several later articles and obituaries claimed she had formally turned down an offer from Biden as well. The original interview does not establish that. In February 2021, Tennessee lawmakers were also considering a statue of Dolly Parton on the grounds of the state capitol. She asked them to withdraw the proposal, saying that, given what was happening in the world, she did not think putting her on a pedestal was appropriate at that moment. She did not rule out a statue years later, perhaps after her death. Again, what she rejected most clearly was the timing and the immediate institutional use of her name. That position kept her audible to groups that agreed on almost nothing. A conservative family could receive books from the Imagination Library. So could a family with same-sex parents. People who lost their homes in Tennessee did not have to share her politics or even know what her politics were to receive help. Partisan neutrality lowered the symbolic price of access. Sometimes, though, that openness came at the cost of removing responsibility from the frame. In an interview recorded in London in 2019, Dolly was asked specifically about Donald Trump's remarks about women. She refused to discuss him and answered instead that everyone should treat other people with respect. The principle is defensible. It also removes from the story the man who made the comments, the power he held, and the women they targeted. Her sister Stella Parton was far less conciliatory. She argued that this kind of silence helped keep women in subordinate positions. Trying to determine whether Dolly was secretly left-wing, secretly right-wing, or somehow too pure for either category does not get us very far. The more useful measure is what her choice did. Marriage equality is won through laws and court decisions. Trans rights can also be taken away through legislation signed by identifiable officials. Helping families after a wildfire repairs part of the damage. It does not replace public prevention or a durable system of compensation. At certain moments, refusing to name the person responsible for a policy limits your ability to fight that policy. Her actions make her generosity difficult to dispute. Her instinct for protecting her market is equally visible in the care she took with her audience. That strategy carried a political cost. The people responsible for policy often disappeared from view. In exchange, her values could enter homes where the name of a political party might have caused those same values to be rejected on arrival. So her politics cannot be measured through statements alone. They become clearer in what kept working after the interview ended. A book arriving every month for a child, and jobs created in the Smokies.
7 a.m. Sky still here, rent still due. The apocalypse didn't RSVP, but it left a voicemail. I spread butter like it's a coping mechanism. I count the birds, all 3. One looks like he knows things. I'm too informed to be surprised, too tired to be outraged, too caffeinated to sleep, too awake to dream. I scroll past fires like they're memes. Gaza, forest, billionaires in space. I react with a toast emoji. I call that balance. This is my end of days routine. Filtered coffee, filtered news. The planet's burdened with bad Wi-Fi, and I'm just refilling my spoon. No breakdowns before breakfast. No hope without sarcasm. Apocalypse with a side of toast and emotional detachment for dessert. My therapist said I dead, my fault probably. I dreamt once that everything was fine. I woke up, my screen told me otherwise. Thanks, screen. I'm not numb, I'm just calibrated. I adjusted the volume on reality, and now it's background music to my mediocre lunch. This is my end of days routine. Hope postponed, truth delayed. Laugh tracks over chaos, guilt microwaved. No hero arc, no grand escape. Just me, a fork in yesterday's shame. Apocalypse with a side of toast, and still I stay.
9 to 5 attacked a social order without telling anyone how to vote. Dolly Parton held that line for decades. She could sing about exploitation, defend a freedom, or fund a concrete response to a problem, then refuse to say which name she marked on a ballot. In 2016, a favorable comment about Hillary Clinton was turned into an endorsement. Parton quickly issued a clarification. She had endorsed neither Clinton nor Donald Trump. 3 years later, speaking with Jad Abumrad for the podcast Dolly Parton's America, she described the balance in her audience this way.
Half my people are Republicans, half of them are Democrats.
She also argued that an entertainer did not need to go on stage and attack someone, and that she had no interest in hurting people who came to hear her perform.
There was a specific idea of the job behind that position.
Her audience had entrusted her with its attention, not its vote. In a 2021 interview with People, she explained that she was careful with public statements because she knew how much weight people could place on her words, including meanings she had never intended. She believed her convictions could be useful. She did not want to turn them into weapons. That restraint also produced a very practical commercial result. A Republican voter could buy a ticket to Dollywood. A lesbian could sing Jolene in a bar. Neither had to pass an ideological entrance exam first. Recognizing that advantage does not prove it was her only motive. Dolly herself pointed to the Dixie Chicks. After Natalie Maines criticized George W. Bush in 2003, boycotts and rejection by many country stations hit the group hard. Dolly knew that an audience could be built, and that it could also be lost. Avoiding party politics did not stop her from taking positions on rights. In November 2009, Joy Behar asked whether she supported same-sex marriage. Dolly said yes, then delivered the answer in her usual way, folding a controversial position into a marital joke.
Sure, why can't they get married? They should suffer like the rest of us do.
The joke did not cancel the position. In the United States, marriage equality was still a major legislative and legal fight. Her support for LGBTQ+ people continued to use the language of acceptance, often grounded in her Christian faith. Human beings were not entitled to judge one another. In 2023, when she was asked about anti-trans legislation passed in Tennessee, she spoke about transgender, gay, and lesbian people in her own family and circle of employees, and about seeing how deeply such measures hurt them.
I just want everybody to be treated good,
She said. She acknowledged the harm. She did not name the governor, the lawmakers, or the specific machinery of the law. When a problem could be met with a material response, Parton was willing to put money and infrastructure behind it. The Imagination Library, launched in Sevier County in 1995, sends an age-appropriate book every month to enrolled children in participating communities, regardless of family income. After the 2016 wildfires in East Tennessee, her foundation created the My People Fund within 2 weeks. It provided direct cash payments to families whose primary homes had been destroyed or made uninhabitable. Recipients were not required to prove that they would spend the money correctly. An evaluation by the University of Tennessee found that cash assistance was especially useful for relocation expenses that insurance did not cover. In April 2020, Parton donated $1 million to Vanderbilt University Medical Center for COVID-19 research. The line repeated ever since, that Dolly funded the Moderna vaccine, goes too far. Her funds supported early research that Vanderbilt scientists described as important, including work testing immune responses connected to the Phase 1 trial of the mRNA 1273 vaccine. Her private donation mattered. The vaccine was still the product of a much larger scientific effort, backed by public institutions. Giving Dolly credit for the whole thing is flattering, irresistible to headlines, and factually wrong. Even the stories about honors she refused need some journalistic cleanup. The Trump administration offered her the Presidential Medal of Freedom twice. She declined once because Carl Dean was ill, and again because she did not want to travel during the pandemic. Early in the Biden presidency, she said she worried that accepting one then might look partisan. Several later articles and obituaries claimed she had formally turned down an offer from Biden as well. The original interview does not establish that. In February 2021, Tennessee lawmakers were also considering a statue of Dolly Parton on the grounds of the state capitol. She asked them to withdraw the proposal, saying that, given what was happening in the world, she did not think putting her on a pedestal was appropriate at that moment. She did not rule out a statue years later, perhaps after her death. Again, what she rejected most clearly was the timing and the immediate institutional use of her name. That position kept her audible to groups that agreed on almost nothing. A conservative family could receive books from the Imagination Library. So could a family with same-sex parents. People who lost their homes in Tennessee did not have to share her politics, or even know what her politics were to receive help. Partisan neutrality lowered the symbolic price of access. Sometimes, though, that openness came at the cost of removing responsibility from the frame. In an interview recorded in London in 2019, Dolly was asked specifically about Donald Trump's remarks about women. She refused to discuss him and answered instead that everyone should treat other people with respect. The principle is defensible. It also removes from the story the man who made the comments, the power he held, and the women they targeted. Her sister Stella Parton was far less conciliatory. She argued that this kind of silence helped keep women in subordinate positions. Trying to determine whether Dolly was secretly left-wing, secretly right-wing, or somehow too pure for either category does not get us very far. The more useful measure is what her choice did. Marriage equality is won through laws and court decisions. Trans rights can also be taken away through legislation signed by identifiable officials. Helping families after a wildfire repairs part of the damage. It does not replace public prevention or a durable system of compensation. At certain moments, refusing to name the person responsible for a policy limits your ability to fight that policy. Her actions make her generosity difficult to dispute. Her instinct for protecting her market is equally visible in the care she took with her audience. That strategy carried a political cost. The people responsible for policy often disappeared from view. In exchange, her values could enter homes where the name of a political party might have caused those same values to be rejected on arrival. So her politics cannot be measured through statements alone. They become clearer in what kept working after the interview ended. A book arriving every month for a child, and jobs created in the Smokies.
Too fast. Too much. She thinks too big, she moves too quick. Not normal.
On August 25th, I eventually put my phone down. The tributes kept piling up, and so did the songs, but the feeling itself had not gone anywhere. No one needed to pretend they had known Dolly Parton personally to feel that something familiar had disappeared. That familiarity had been built over decades. It did not depend on a level of confession that handed the whole person over to the public. Dolly returned to certain memories, joked about the same subjects, and protected the rest. She offered enough continuity for a relationship to form. The boundaries remained hers. Pop culture is not very good at handling that distinction. We tend to use constructed as a synonym for fake. Dolly never asked anyone to believe that her hair grew that way naturally, or that a rhinestone-covered outfit had somehow landed on her body by accident. Her appearance came from her taste as much as from strategy. That did not make the emotions in her songs or the values she expressed any less sincere. She had chosen a public form and refused to let the fact that it was chosen cancel what she genuinely put into it. That control extended beyond what people could see. She understood that being recognized everywhere did not guarantee any control over the work itself once it started circulating. A song can change voices, genres, and then generations. Ownership of the composition still determines who can authorize certain uses and who receives the corresponding income. Celebrity gets attention. Rights determine what remains when the attention moves somewhere else. That autonomy also gave her room to write from experiences that country music often made easier to tolerate by treating them as private misfortune. Sexual judgment, poverty, violence, or work without recognition. Dolly did not always use the vocabulary of the movements fighting those conditions. Her songs still carried the substance of those struggles into cars, kitchens, and offices. You could hum the melody before admitting that the lyrics were about power. The method was clearly effective, and it came with a political cost. Her refusal of party affiliation kept her audible to people who would never have stayed in the same room for a campaign speech. It also meant that she sometimes spoke about the human side of an issue, without naming the people responsible for a law or the mechanisms producing the harm she condemned. That restraint protected her relationship with the audience. At times, it also narrowed the reach of the criticism. Philanthropy creates a similar tension. Sending books to children has a concrete effect. It does not release public institutions from the obligation to fund access to reading, and the program itself depends on local partners, and in some places, public money. Dollywood provides jobs in East Tennessee, while selling visitors a selected version of Appalachia. The jobs do not become imaginary because the representation is commercial. The representation does not become neutral because the jobs are real. Turning Dolly into a moral answer to every American problem would not help us understand her. Her generosity could be real, and so could her business instincts. Her partisan silence widened her audience and left some conflicts unnamed. Those tensions let us look at what she actually did, instead of assigning her a perfection she never needed. Her family asked that expressions of grief take the form of donations to the Imagination Library. That request directs emotion toward an organization that still has to pay for printing and postage, renew partnerships, and enroll new children. Continuity is not automatic. It requires budgets and people doing the work. The songs will keep circulating. Another performer will sing "I Will Always Love You" or "Jolene" in a voice Dolly could never have predicted. A book will keep arriving with a child's name on it. In Tennessee, employees will go back to work at businesses she helped establish. That is where the emotion of August 25th becomes very simple. Dolly is dead, while part of her work remains inside other people's lives. Audiences who shared neither the same tastes nor the same convictions felt as though they had lost someone because she had made that relationship constant without requiring them to agree on everything. Everyone had met a slightly different Dolly. They all carried the same signature and respected the same boundary. She made herself accessible without handing herself over completely. We kept looking, sometimes, for the real Dolly behind the character. She had been clear all along. Dolly Parton was a construction, and she intended to remain its author. And that is it for this special episode of Ink and Acid. If you enjoyed it, you know the drill. Follow the podcast on your platform of choice, leave a rating or a comment, or share the episode with someone else. It is free, it helps the podcast enormously, and unlike quite a few things in this economy, nobody is going to ask you for a premium subscription before you can click 5 stars. You can also find me on social media for Ink and Acid, behind-the-scenes work on upcoming episodes, and everything orbiting my other projects. And if you want to go a little further, head to Maison de Mieville. You will find the podcast there, my books, my publications, and the rest of my creative work. Basically, the place where I put everything I make when I am not busy turning 70 years of Dolly Parton's career into a mildly indecent quantity of research notes. All the links are in the episode description. Thank you for listening to Ink and Acid. I will be back very soon with another episode. Until then, stay curious, keep an eye on whatever you are being sold as obvious, and remember that a little rhinestone has never stopped anyone from knowing exactly what she was doing. See you soon.
Too fast. Too much. She thinks too big. She moves too quick. Not normal.
I write a page, you take a week. I see the end before you even speak.
Check.
You're still debating, I'm 10 steps ahead. By the time you blink, I've already fled. Laser focus, minds in orbit. I decode the game before they sort it. Slow me down? Nah, not a chance. I'm the glitch they never planned.
She's too fast. She's too loud.
It's gotta be AI.
Not normal.
Who am I? An error, a misfit, a shadow they fear. Who am I? Too quick, too sharp, or just too clear? Who am I? A tempest coated in fire and steel. Who am I? I'm me, and that's too real.
To a slower flow. Confidence dripping in every line.
They say I move like I don't belong. I build worlds while they sing the same song. One step, two step, I break the mold. Blueprints burned, I make my own gold. She's working too fast, must be a cheat. Not just a mind, they can't compete. She's got no patience, she's over the top. Not just a vision that won't be stopped.
Too fast. Too much. Too strong.
Who am I? An error, a misfit, a shadow they fear. Who am I? Too quick, too sharp, or just too clear? Who am I? An error, a misfit, a shadow they fear. Who am I? Too quick, too sharp, or just too clear? Who am I? A tempest coated in fire and steel. Who am I? I'm me, and that's too real.
They don't get it. They never will.